18th November in the year 2020, we saw numerous Ugandans, approximately 50, losing their lives on the streets of Kampala. Today, we are questioning, or we are remembering the Kampala November killings. 3 years down the road, has justice been served? Joining me to discuss this very emotional but very timely conversation is a panel of distinguished ladies and gentlemen from Makerere University, Uganda Pentecostal University, and Uganda Christian University, who will help us put into perspective this conversation. My name is Douglas Drake. I'm your host for tonight's conversation. Welcome to the Inter-University Interface. I'll just begin from my extreme right. As a way of introduction, you can go ahead and introduce yourself and let our dear viewers get to know who exactly we're going to be interacting with. Most welcome.
Thank you, Drake. Good morning, my fellow panelists and all our viewers out there. My name is Mugisa Mathew. I'm a third-year student of law at Makerere University. I'm happy to be here. It's my first time, and I hope this will be a very insightful and educative conversation.
Definitely. Your first time is going to be remarkable, discussing something that is very pertinent, timely at the same time, because a few weeks ago we saw the leader of opposition having a rejoinder to a statement of the shrinking and the human rights abuses, the shrinking civic space and the human rights abuses in Uganda. And I believe as a student of law, you'll have a greater insight to that as well. But thank you. We're very happy to have you here.
Thank you.
The lady on the show, most welcome.
Thank you so much, Drake. My name is Akampurira Shamim, and I'm a law student, third year at Ceasor University. I'm so happy to be here to discuss these important issues, because this is a very, very delicate time, and we are really hurt by what is happening, so we need to discuss them so we can see the way forward.
Thank you. Looking forward to having and getting your insights. So it looks like today's panel is all those students, and you're the ones going to speak about these human rights violations. But thank you. The gentleman who has been on the show a couple of times, say most welcome.
Thank you very much, Drake. Yes, my name is Andrew Kinobere, and I'm a third-year law student. And as usual, I'm delighted to be here and have these wonderful discussions, because as the young people, we're the people who are supposed to move this country's agenda forward. So I'm always delighted to be here, and I'm looking forward to a very wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much. We're very happy to have you here once again. So before we delve into the nitty-gritty of our conversation today, usually I prefer it when our panelists go ahead and give us their insights on how they want to front their argumentation. So as a way of or form of introduction on how you want to front your various argumentations, I'll begin with you, Matthew. What particular roadmap do you have for this conversation? How do you want it to go?
In regards to this conversation, I would like us to, first of all, look at a brief picture, paint a picture of what happened in November 2020. And then from there, we can look at the various violations of human rights and the various issues that arose from that particular event. Then we can also ask ourselves, what has government done in trying to better civic space in this country? What has government done in trying to uphold its duty to protect the rights of citizens in this country? Then we can, as you can't have a problem without a solution.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I would like us at the end of the day to come up with a way forward, something that we can pitch out there and hope that someone is watching and someone from government can pick a leaf or two from this conversation, and even our fellow viewers, our dear viewers out there, pick something from this conversation, and the responsible authorities out there can pick a leaf and sort of correct the wrongs that have been done in the past.
Wonderful. You definitely give us a very clear roadmap as you want to drive the conversation. You're looking at painting a picture of what exactly happened. That means you're looking at the timeline of and the events. Two, you want to look at the various violations of human rights that occurred in that time in that time frame. But three, you want to go ahead and question what government has done in executing its obligations. And lastly, way forward. Shamim, when you listen to Matthew's how he wants to take on this conversation, I'll definitely also hear from you how exactly you want the conversation to flow on your end?
Well, I think he's on the right path because we need to discuss what really happened in 2020 November. It was tragic. It was really painful because so many lives have been suffering. So many families cannot feed their children because some of their people have been detained, we don't even know where they are actually. So I would also want us to look at the reports that came out after 3 years. It's really been a long time. So I feel like the reports that came out are insufficient, and I also feel like the government has really been reluctant to give these people justice. And I would also want us to discuss about how the government is responding to the violation of human rights. Then there's also been an issue of saying that they're victimizing Muslims. So I would want us to discuss all that and see and know why exactly they're reluctant and know why they can't just give out information about where they took people, because so many people are suffering. They were giving excuses that that people did, like the next of kin did not respond positively. But I think it's because those people are so hurt, they are so frustrated that even when they see these people coming to get information from them, they know it's just, it's just to maybe pass time. So 3 years is a very long period, and I think we should discuss and know why and how we can solve this problem.
Definitely. We're looking forward to hearing from you the same. You concur with Matthew that definitely we need to interrogate the timeline and the events that occurred. Then we look at, you say you need to assess the human rights reports, and your conclusion is they're insufficient. But exactly, we need to know why government has been redundant in its response to see that there is upholding of human rights in this country. Looking forward to that. Let me get to you, Mr. Andrew Chinovere. How would you take this conversation?
Yes, thank you very much, Drake. For me, there's one thing I believe in, that in society, what defines society is the history that we have as society. So if we're to look at the events that are happening, yes, we must look at our history in society and our history as Ugandans, If we're to look at the history that we're having in Uganda, we must look at, first of all, the preamble, starting from our constitution, and also looking at the national objectives. And on that, we're then supposed to bring in the objectives that brought the current government that we're having into power. And that is looking at the 10 points program of the NRA fighters as they're coming into power.
Yeah.
After looking at that history, we now look at the status quo. On their agenda, they came with things such as solving the violation of human rights and conversations surrounding all that. But what are we having right now? We're having continued violations of human rights massively. And it's becoming indecent, Someone said once that it's no longer funny, because those days we would look at it, but right now we're now seeing the current situation we're having in Uganda. So I think our argument and our conversation should revolve around the ideas that brought the government into power. Because at the end of the day, it is the government we're going to hold accountable, because it's these people that we give our votes, it's these people that we put into power every after 5 years that are responsible for us. So what we should do is that we're supposed to question the kind of leadership they have provided to us, because at the end of the day, if we cannot put our minds and questions on that brought them into power, then we're not going to be able to have viable solutions, because what are you going to hold them accountable for? But if we say that this is what you promised us, this is what you're supposed to give us, then we can be able to determine what we're supposed to demand for. So I believe our conversation should revolve around that, because us as Ugandans, straight from the constitution, the government doesn't owe us any rights. These rights are just inherent. They don't owe us any rights. They're supposed to respect them. So if there are violations, then we're supposed to question them. Why? And if at all we are entrusting you with our rights, then why should they be violated at the end of the day? So I think that's where.
All right. So I'm just going to stick with you, and you're going to bring us up to speed from the historical perspective, and that is an interesting one, because your roadmap is focusing on the historical perspective and the national objectives in our constitution, the status quo which all the other panelists agree upon, and the other areas of interrogating the continued human rights violations and also you bring up something new that we have to look at. We have to question the leadership of the regime. But let's just start with you. Bring us up to speed from that historical perspective that will lead us to the conversation today.
Yes, thank you very much. Drake, I don't think it's news to Ugandans. It's news to Ugandans about the kind of leadership we have been having in this country. You know, starting from as late as the regime of Mutesa. You know, the kinds of government you have been having, the overthrows, the continued overthrows. You know, and for me, the reason as why I say we should look at the history. When the NRM government was coming into power, you know, they came on something they called the 10-point agenda. It had a lot of things, education, what, but majorly, and the thing that the Museveni regime brags about the most, you know, is the fact that they have brought peace into the country, and that is the thing that brought them into power. You know, even them, as they were coming into power, there were a lot of killings. You know, and Ugandans looked at the NRA government as this messiah that had come to bring them from all these struggles and everything. So if you are to look at that historical bit of it, you know, we realize that the history of Ugandans, people are traumatized. Some people are still traumatized. I would say that at least the older generations, our fathers' generations, some of them are still traumatized. That is why when you go to some areas such as northern Uganda, they will fear talking about removing Museveni because they know what they talked about. They know what they went through. Sorry, you know. So if you are to look at that, then we are supposed to understand the nature of society we are having. We're having a society of Ugandans that have seen these things before, you know. And if they have seen these things before, the majority don't want to go back to this kind of things, you know. So if we are having such a history, and then we are having repetitions of this history, you know, orchestrated by the people who are supposed to give us the freedom that we are supposed to have, then it becomes very sad and becomes very scary. You know, the future of the country is then put in a position where no one is certain. You don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. You know, and yet the government we are having boasts about how they have given us the freedom and everything. You know, so at the end of the day, we are going to have a kind of situation in Uganda that is similar to that of a war zone. But if Uganda is not in war, if we're not in war with anyone else, then why should we create our own civil war within a country, orchestrated by the people who are supposed to protect us? You know, so for me, to me, that is how I look at everything, and that is how I want to understand everything.
Okay.
You know?
Thank you. It's true that history informs our present, but also it predicts our future. And Matthew, from that historical perspective, I just want us now to bring the conversation to that timeline and events that happened on November 18th, but also other human rights violations. Just take us up to speed and interrogate the events then, but then bring us up front to how exactly this then leads us to the human rights violations that Shamim is going to respond to.
Okay, thank you once again, Drake. November 18th, 2020. I remember that was about the time when presidential candidates had been cleared to do rallies.
Yes.
To canvass the country for votes, and they were supposed to do it in a manner that is, you know,
Scientific.
And if I would like to ask, do you think that was realistic? We know how
passionate
people are about the politics, their political parties and things like that. So I think the current NUP president, that is Robert Chagulanyi, had begun his campaign, his countrywide campaign, and on that morning, not the day before, I'm not sure, but around that time, as he was campaigning, police alleged that he had breached the scientific mode of campaigning, and of course, he was arrested. I still remember the images all over TV. I was up country back then, so the truth is I didn't physically experience what was happening in Kampala. But of course, it's a digital era. You watch TV, on social media, you could see. I remember I was put in those police trucks, bundled up, thrown in there. then of course people began protesting.
People started ranting, free Bobby
started
wine.
ranting, free Bobby wine all over Kampala, and various parts of the country as well.
Yeah.
Though mainly within central Uganda. And yes, so I think that didn't sit well with government. I don't know whether they felt threatened. To me, a government is like it's like a rich man and a poor man having interest in the same girl. So government is like the rich man who is insecure that this poor man, who is insecure that the girl is more attracted to this poor man. So I think it's a similar situation. So government felt threatened back then and decided to go full force.
What I remember the president said, he says that those unrests, they threatened the peace of the country.
Yes.
So they were trying to put that to bed once and for all.
Yes. So what happened is that by the end of the day, about 54 people were killed, so many injured. And the truth of the matter is that not all people that were killed were actually protesting.
Yeah.
Some were carrying out their businesses in town and things like that. So now, fast forward to this day, there have been so many incidences of people being bundled up in the famous drones now. There are so many unlawful arrests taking place.
Yeah.
Remember the two MPs, Zake and Sewanyana and Segirinya, who spent a very long time in prison without getting bail or any redress to their matter. So not only that, there have been so many human rights violations by government up to date. So now, like he had said earlier, we're supposed to hold government accountable. This is the government that, first of all, these human rights are inherent, right? So government is only supposed to help us achieve these various rights. Now, basing on the events of November 2020, the right to life was grossly violated. Yeah. You look at
non-derogable rights like prohibition from torture.
Prohibition from torture,
unlawful
detention, right to fair hearing. So many people are in custody without, seeing the courtroom. So now, once again, I want to ask myself, if you look back, it's important to respect history and to acknowledge history. The government that came into power boasting that, up to date, they boast so proud of how they have brought peace to Uganda. The president.
But there's peace, isn't that peace?
I think it's until you've been a victim of their high-handedness that you can tell whether there is peace or not. I think it's relative.
It's subjective.
It's subjective, yeah. So you can't say there is as much peace as the government says it has delivered to Uganda. Because the things that are happening now, are they very different from what happened between 1971 and 1979?
Okay, let me bring in Shamim. Shamim, Mathew, in his somber, calm submission, gives us the timeline of an event. Now, let us look at it from the perspective of the violations, the various numerous violations of human rights that occurred in that period. When Mathew was submitting, you went ahead and also supplemented and mentioned those violations. Take us through, we want to understand, or the viewers there would want to know, Ugandans forget very fast. So we are remembering that, and we are interrogating whether justice has been served 3 years down the road. What are those violations that happened?
Taking us back, 2020, November 18th, the reports say there are 54 people who were killed. So that's a violation of the right to life. That is one. And you realize that most Ugandans have actually even forgotten, unless you're a victim or like your relative is a victim or a friend, you're actually going to forget what really happened. But it is absurd that it's been 3 years. And it's also absurd that the government has been silent until Mr. Mathew, who is the leader of opposition, came out. He has been rioting in parliament. He has been raising these concerns over and over until they decided to give a report. The violations, there was unlawful confinement, because we all know that according to the Magistrates Court Act, if you suspect someone of committing a crime, because they said that they arrested them not because of their political parties or anything. They arrested them because they suspected that they were what? They had committed some crimes. That is what the report says. So I feel like they're saying that they followed the law, but there's no law that says that you can confine someone unlawfully and then detain them for more than 48 hours. The Constitution even says that it should not even be more than 21 days. If the Uganda Human Rights Commission has been given a right to review those reports up to 21 days, according to the Constitution. So if they've been there for 3 years, I think that is really so unfair. And you've seen how Mr. Bobby Wine has been treated. Robert Chagulanyi, the leader of the No Party. The other day he was coming from the airport. You saw that, how he was immediately,
But that allegation was they were giving him safe transport home.
Not really. People were ready to welcome him because he's a leader of a political party.
Yeah.
It's like you've seen the General Muhoozi going to Kabale
Shamim,
and
you're
rallies.
also aware of the fact that before you go ahead and convene, you're a student of law. You know, when you want to hold a rally or bring other people together, there are procedures you follow. So would it then be justified to say that taking off Bobby Wine from the airport to cause commotion, was it bad or it was?
I don't really think it was going to cause commotion because people are just excited. People just want to be happy for a political party they are supporting. So it doesn't mean that when people come together to welcome someone from whatever he's been doing, they're going to fight and all that. You realize that the moment the UPDF comes in, that's when the riots come in, because they're just going to chase out people. They're just going to put stray bullets and all that and all that. So that is what really brings because I remember that day I was actually going to the airport and most roads of Bunyonyi were blocked. People don't even have where to pass because there's police that is going to pass through. So I feel like they have violated very many human rights, and there's actually an allegation that actually they have been victimizing Muslims, because you realize most of the victims were Muslims. Another thing, there are also reports that some of the people were actually taken from their workplaces or homes. They just come and pick you out.
On that point of victimizing Muslims, our constitution provides for non-discrimination. Even the Bill of Rights, the the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we say we need to treat everyone irrespective of race, gender, religion, etc. Would it then be justified that among all the violations, discrimination is among those fundamentals that aren't supposed to be tempered or actually done by a state?
Yeah, I feel like it's really fundamental, because the moment that the leader of opposition raised it in parliament is because they have seen it. They have all those names. They had around 30 names. Even when the chairperson of the Uganda Human Rights Commission said they only found 12 people who were arrested, then bailed out and all that and all that. But I feel like these people have been doing secret investigations. They have their names. And the government gave out a report that the next of kins did not what? They did not comply. They did not give them enough information. They actually said that the Secretary General of NUP did not give them the identity cards so that they could get more information about finding out these people. But I feel like it's really as easy as you took someone, just bring them back or tell us where they are, because they're not considering these families that are suffering. We've seen cases of people who are detained in prison, or like a lady, the husband has been in prison and she has 2, 3, 4 kids. She needs to pay rent. She needs to feed them. She needs to survive, and they can't even just give a report. Some people were just saying, okay, if you killed our people, just tell us, bring their bodies so we can really. So you realize that it has taken people to frustration. Some people are depressed because of what is happening. And I was reading some reports that Joe Biden, when he was there's a time when Bobby Wine was outside, and then they were talking about how Uganda has violated human rights. And when you also add to the signing of the homosexuality bill, when they're also saying that that was violation of human rights. So I feel like where we are going, it's a slippery road, and if we are not really careful, if we don't raise all these issues that the government is ignoring or is reluctant to bring solutions, it's really going to be tough out there, because you're just seeing these people, you just see strange names, Hassan and all that, but tomorrow it could be you, or it could be your family member, or it could actually be you being detained just like that. You're just there, you're being arrested, and there's even no law that says that you've committed a crime, you know. So there are so many violations that have been committed on these people, and I feel like they deserve justice.
Okay, thank you. Andrew, in your first introduction, you made view that you are going to question the leadership of this regime. And as a student of human rights, we know that the government's obligations, the state obligations, are three. That is to respect, fulfill, and protect. And in respecting human rights, they are supposed to refrain from the enjoyment of human rights of other people. In protecting, they should carry all necessary measures to see that people enjoy the human rights. And in fulfilling, so they need to put all the necessary measures they can put in place to see that people enjoy the human rights. But back to what my brother Mathew and Shamim were talking about. Shamim was talking about the violations that occurred, and Mathew gave us a timeline of those events. The government's obligation to protect, fulfill, and respect, have they done enough? Because have investigations been done, first of all? Speak to the issue of their obligations, but also related to whether investigations have been done, and see to it that justice is served to these people.
Okay, thank you very much. Firstly, I would want to start by refraining from what my colleague said, Shamim. I don't believe Ugandans are forgotten. I don't believe Ugandans are forgotten. One, the reason as to why it may seem so is because Ugandans are in a position where they are vulnerable. Even if they keep on remembering this thing, they have nothing to do. Secondly, Ugandans, unlike our leaders that we are having today, they are very good students of history. It is going to take a while for you to see the kinds of riot that we had in November 3 years back. It's going to take a while. In fact, I don't think from that time during COVID until this time we have had the riot that we had in November. Why? People are scared. Someone in their book talked about how a revolution is not for cowards. And I'm sorry to say, but I think in Uganda, us as Ugandans, we are cowards.
Really?
We fear.
This panel here has very competent and very able people.
Yeah,
we have seen leaders, people outside. We have seen a couple of leaders who are engaging in seeing to it that they push the government to the wall. The leader of opposition in parliament. Numerous political leaders have done so.
Drake, I know you're a person who looks at events that happen around the world.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's anywhere in the world where there's been a revolution in the recent times through dialogue. It hasn't happened.
So you are propounding violence.
I'm not propounding violence. Foot soldiers. So with us, if that is the case, then then Ugandans cannot repeat, or it will take long before they repeat what happened.
I think
because they do not have the facilities.
In my
to
opinion,
facilitate
I think the better argument for me would be that we need to first of all uphold our civic responsibility. One, Ugandans are not aware of what their rights are, first of all. You see, for us to go ahead and fight for what we believe in, we must know what we are actually fighting for. So how many Ugandans know?
Then Drake, let me ask you a question
right.
then. Does it really matter if Ugandans know their rights?
I
Do you
think
think even if they knew their rights, the government would respect them?
The thing is, even in countries like South Africa, before, during the periods of apartheid, South Africans had one belief of fighting what? Racism. And that was the idea behind apartheid. Just knowing exactly what your vision is and knowing your mission would propound you to do the same. I think Uganda's situation is somewhat complicated in that we are in a state whereby we even do not know exactly what we are fighting for. Someone is fighting, you see someone X is fighting a different fight, someone Y is fighting a different fight. we are lost. We're in that state of quagmire. We do not know exactly where we're heading. But back to the submission.
Okay, but back to the submissions. Still, I don't think that even if Ugandans knew their rights,
Yeah.
because they don't have the facilities, you know, if we're dealing with a militaristic government,
Yeah.
militaristic kind of state, then even if you know your rights, it is immaterial because you'll be suppressed, you know. But going back to what you asked me, has the government upheld the rights of Ugandans, and have investigations been done? The answer is very clear. They haven't been done, you know, because you cannot tell us that 3 years down the road, you're closing investigations, by the way. The investigations into the November 18th killing, they're being closed. Yeah, they're being closed, meaning that if we have had 3 years of making these investigations, even where the violators of these rights are very clear and were seen by the whole world, you know, you're telling us that you've not given us a report, you know. It's so sad that even at the time when these investigations had just kicked off, the president came out and made statements that restricted anyone from giving a report on these investigations.
Yet the Human Rights Commission is supposed to be the one doing
Exactly.
So. Yeah.
So if we are having such a kind of situation in Uganda, even if the investigations are done, you know, and at the end of the day we're not given a report of the investigations, then it is good as nothing. So in Uganda, we have a kind of system whereby everything that is done has to be politicized. For goodness sake, you're dealing with human rights. You know, you're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with people's fathers.
Yeah.
You know, you're dealing with people's livelihood. You know, and then you say that when a report has to come out, it has to first be censored by the executive. You know, it doesn't make any kind of sense at all. So I would profoundly say that investigations in Uganda have not been made, and that is the sad bit. That is the sad bit, because at the end of the day, Ugandans expect answers. So where are the answers going to come from? You know, if there's constant violation of human rights, even if these violations have not been done by the government as they claim they have not done them, then why do you fear to give people a report? Is it because the report is not there? Is it because no investigations have been done? You know, so where do we lie as Ugandans? You know, so that is the kind of situation we are balancing in as Ugandans. We all don't know which is which, because each side is just passing on the ball. You go to the opposition, they're saying it is the government. You go to the government, where our people, they're saying some of these people are ghost people. Some of these killings are being done by the opposition, you know, and the organs that are supposed to give us these reports and kind of be the umpire on all this are all quiet, because they have been told to keep quiet. Okay. You know, so that makes all the systems that we are having an illusion. These are just people who are gaining salaries. At the end of the day, it's nothing.
So it goes back to your argument of questioning the leadership.
Questioning the leadership.
All right, Matthew.
Yeah.
Submissions made by Shamim and Andrew and yourself seem to imply that tonight's discussion on whether justice has been served 3 years down the road is more blood to the inclination that most likely not. But let's still proceed with the conversation nonetheless. Even with the constraints with finances that we face in this country, at least in my opinion, I think something has been done. Some investigations have been done. Some sort of justice has been served. The government has a mandate, I said earlier on, mentioned as a student of human rights. They say the 3 fundamental obligations of a state. That is to respect, fulfill, and protect human rights. But also, as someone who, as a student of jurisprudence, there is an idea that runs on the horse of the social contract theory, that we have a citizenry that who empowers its government with its votes, and the government, with the votes empowered to them, have to give back to the citizens. From the submissions that I seem to get from you, it looks like that contract is being breached a couple of times. And we know, for those students who study contract law, they would say if a contract has been breached, definitely one has to get redress. But Ugandans getting redress. Now the question to you is in line of the legal and judicial process. You mentioned in your submission that we have seen MPs like Honorable Segirinya who have been in jail and been denied bail for more than 2 years, among others. We have seen Ugandans who we are not aware of being detained in jail even without being arraigned before court. Has justice been served?
Thank you once again, Drake. Has justice been served? I think if any justice has been served, then it's to a very small extent. What we have seen is that the judiciary and the entire justice, law and order sector, all that, when a matter is political in nature and it involves the opposition particularly, there is a lot of back and forth. There is a lot of power play. There is a lot of, I don't know, ping pong going on between, the officials of the court, the judicial officers and prosecution and things like that. Then at the end of the day, charges are dropped after a person has spent, I don't know, 2-3 years in prison. I'll use the example of the two MPs once again, Segirinya and Sewanyana. Up to date, I do not know why those people were detained. Of course, the allegations were that
Allegations of murder,
the massacre killings, they were charged, I think, terrorism, murder, and inciting violence, things like that. And it took, I don't know, I think those people were in prison for 18 months.
More than, yeah.
Close to 2 years.
Close to 2 years in prison. And it took, I think, the intervention of the Chief Justice. I remember at one of the events where he was in attendance and the president was also in attendance, he kept on saying that they would work on some of these things. And Norbert Mao was said he would have a conversation to ensure that these people are brought up. Why does it have to be certain people to? I thought
we have systems and
yes,
and,
we have
and
systems and organs that work, and we have a constitution that says we're all supposed to be treated equally before the law.
Yeah.
Why is it that when we see people attached to opposition, when they're in conflict with the law, why do they have to? Why is there a lot of begging done for them to be released?
And yet, on the contrary, when people in government
Yes.
got in accusations, for example, the issues of iron sheets, we see DPP dropping charges.
The other day, I was watching, I think someone on Twitter. I was on Twitter and I saw the Minister of Finance making a statement saying he's deeply hurt by the corruption in this country. And I remember during the Mabati saga.
It's laughable, right?
Yeah, it's very laughable, really. It's very ironic. During the Mabati saga, he was deeply involved and he said he didn't know how the iron sheets got to his farm. So you see the irony. Someone who is saying he's very disturbed by the corruption in this country has been involved in shady business.
Yeah.
So I think my issue with the judiciary is that when matters tend to be political in nature, they do not act swiftly. They do not.
But also know the law says that the judiciary is not supposed to inquire into issues that are political in nature.
That is true, but at least do the bare minimum. Do the bare minimum. You cannot continue, adjourning court sessions.
I think in that defense, because the law is very clear, the judiciary would only inquire into facts, material facts that respond into aspects of the law, but not into aspects of politics. If you read the book by Professor Olako Nyango, yeah, the aspect to do with the political question doctrine. I think in Uganda, in our growing jurisprudence, that is still a line that is still growing.
But Drake, then in that situation, if you cannot be part of the solution, then do not be part of the problem.
But the fact is,
But they are being part of the problem.
They are the problem.
So all of you have agreed that.
All right. Yeah. So I think it would be a lie. Blatantly to state it would be a lie to say that justice has been served, because there's still people missing. I've never seen courtroom. As we all know, investigations into the November killings is being closed.
It's never been clear.
Yeah, it's never been clear. So I don't know.
But Matthew, don't you think that could possibly rely on the fact that we have an underfunded Uganda Human Rights Commission? They have very many financial constraints that prevent them from carrying out their mandate.
It's almost laughable to think that we actually have a human rights commission, because I've barely felt the impact of the human rights commission. Most times what happens is that civil organizations, NGOs, humanitarian organizations are the ones that sort of spark conversations and try to hold government accountable.
But that is that is the mandate.
Yes, that is their mandate.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that we have barely seen the Human Rights Commission doing something similar. I remember about a week ago, Huripec, the Human Rights Peace Center at Makerere, celebrated 30 years, and Professor Oloka Onyango was saying all of us have a duty, especially students of the law, human rights activists. You have a duty to sort of hold government accountable. He used an analogy of the mosquito. He said we're like mosquitoes that do not give the government sleep at night, because he says, yes, the government might undermine human rights activists, but you know when you're in your bedroom and there's a mosquito, you can barely sleep. It will keep on.
Usually you have to wake up and
you have to wake up
mosquito.
Yes. So he said something similar, and he said we cannot sit back and wait for, say, the Human Rights Commission to do something. So all of us, at the end of the day, have a
Collective
duty,
action.
Yeah, collectively, so ensure that justice is served. It might not be served to everyone, but at least ensure that one or two people get justice at the end of the day. But I don't think up to date justice has been substantially served to the victims of the November killing.
So it's unfortunate that I'm the only one trying to support the government here.
Actually, I was going to tell you earlier on that the law says he who alleges must prove, so we must have had someone from government to defend them.
Yeah. Shamim, it looks like the panel is greatly bent on the view that no justice has been served. You're a student of law, and you know the principles relating to separation of power. When we talk about legal and judicial process, what comes into my head, we have an organ that has to make independent decisions that are free from any encumbrance from the executive or from the legislature. But there's an argument here that we have. We usually see a hand from either the executive or the legislature when it comes to the aspect of the judiciary carrying out their mandate and doing their role. Maybe that would support Matthew's assertions that when we had, when MPs in Segirinya and Sewanyana, when were arrested, allegations were that there were hands of the state, which is executive, that was affecting or that was sitting on top of the judiciary. Respond to the issue of legal and judicial processes in line of separations of power, but relating it to the aspect of remembering these people who died on November 18th. Has justice really been served to them?
Thank you so much, Drake. According to what he has said, and according to the separation of powers, because there are some things that are specifically supposed to be done by the legislature, then the judiciary, then the executive. But if you're really to see it clearly, yes, there's separation of powers, but there are some decisions that cannot be made without being concealed or maybe I can say sieved by the executive. And you realize that there's going to be, I can say maybe those days in COVID-19, and they're going to be like, okay, go out. Then one person is going to be like, okay, don't go out. Yeah. So there are decisions that are made, but then the executive has to, has to have a hand. You realize that even when they released the reports, they say that the executive had to first, see those files before they have been released.
Yeah.
And even when they were released by the Minister of Internal Affairs, you know. So I feel like there's not really a big gap on the separation of powers. I feel like they all get involved, and I feel like in this in the way they really are, they are not really observing properly the separation of powers, because there's some decisions that are just supposed to be done by the judiciary, you know. If they have taken Sewanyana and Sejirinya to court, why does it have to be someone like Norbert Mao to be like, I'm going to talk to them so they can release you, or I'm going to talk to this one, or the president is going to think about it, and you know. So I feel like if they have decided to take them to court for the court procedure, if they've decided to follow the law of, okay, these people have committed crimes, let's take them to court and we're going to, you know, give out decisions, I feel like they should just let the court handle that and see whether they are what. Because in most cases, they don't really have evidence. They're just trying to take time, you know, like you go to court, then you're like, okay, where is this witness? They're not around. You've seen those court cases. The judge comes and they're like, okay, we don't really have time. Do you have any information that you want to give? You know, something like that. Then they're going to be like, we have adjourned till next year, February. And then they don't consider the fact that these people are going to be in prison until the next year, February, and they're going to be suffering. We've seen, is it Honorable Sejirinya very sick? Yeah, he almost died from wherever he was. He had wounds. I saw the mom crying on television. She's saying, I just don't even want my son to go out, because the moment he goes out, they're probably going to kill him from there, you know. So when it gets to that extent, when it gets to the fact that we have to first go through the executive to make all the decisions, it's unfair. Yeah, because you realize that if you detain someone, let the law proceed and let them get justice. But if you detain someone, then you also have to wait for the executive to be like, okay, let them go. You know, you have to first beg for justice to be served. Like, okay, please, people have to first, you know, you've seen newspapers, people are crying. My friend was telling me of a scenario when Bobby Wine wakes up one day and some mothers and children are on his gate saying, but what are we supposed to eat? Our people were fighting for you and now they are nowhere. You know, how are we supposed to survive? So when it gets to that extent of someone who is just a political leader, who is just fighting for human rights, having the burden of paying school fees for some of those kids, of waking up to people commenting, people, you know, there are people who are actually saying people should, like, my family should not even have fought for you.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be in that saga, you know. So I feel like it is really absurd and justice has not been served. Okay, I cannot say that the Human Rights Commission has not done anything, okay, because there are so many violations of human rights that are in Uganda, you know, and they are trying to fight maybe for the females or for the
Vulnerable
children,
children.
yeah, you know. But when it comes to issues that are political in nature, it's like they're also scared to, you know, give out the truth. I even feel like they got some of this information, but they realize that if they put it out, it's going to like penalize the government in some, you know, because I'm sure there are those people that they got and interviewed and they're like, but what really happened? They're going to be like, okay, this UPDF shoot, you know, because they were saying the bodyguard of Bobby Wine and some lady, they were hit by some UPDF car, something of the sort. So, and if people saw this, if these things have been done in broad daylight, it means that they can just give out the information as easy as it is, you know. They don't really have to first give excuses. We were saying that actually the NUP is the problem, because it told some of these next of kin, some of these family members, not to answer to any, you know, to any government people who are coming to ask those questions, or to the Human Rights Commission. But I feel like those are just excuses. I feel like even when they found out that information, probably they took it to the executive and it was like, no, don't give this out. They're going to penalize us. They're going to penalize the government. So justice has not been served, and it's really unfair. The only thing that we can do right now is talk about it so people can know, people can be informed, and those who have the power to do what they can do something.
All right. Andrew, in your introduction, you made mention that the ideas that brought this government, this regime into power, was one based on respect and upholding the fundamental human rights. they came with the idea that they were the fronts of change, and they're the ones who are going to uphold change. Scrutinizing their 30 plus years into power, and looking at the various violations that have occurred, have they actually upheld their promise to Ugandans?
Thank you very much, Drake. Now, there's one thing that is true for sure. Too much of anything is never good. It's never good, you know. And there's one thing that I believe in, that if someone has not been trusted with less, then we cannot continue giving them more. Because surely if they cannot work well with less, then we cannot giving them more. Cannot continue giving them more, you know. As I mentioned earlier on, when this NRM regime came into power, they had a lot of promises, and everyone looked at them as the Messiah.
Yeah.
These were our people that were coming to fight for us. These are people that were coming to correct the wrongs of the past regime, you know. But Drake, at the end of the day, and my panelists, when at the end of the day, the leaders we're having turn into dealers, at the end of the day, what do we expect? Some of these things become obvious,
Yeah.
you know. When the NRA regime had just come into power, I would say that Uganda experienced a period that most of our forefathers had never seen, a period of peace, a period of strategic movement and continuous growth, you know. But when everything started prolonging, you know, this is what happens when we start having political junkies in Uganda. I'm sorry to
the president said Africa's problem is leaders who overstay in power.
One thing I love about our president, that is a man of good speeches. He's a man of good speeches. When he said that, that was I think ever since he joined government, that is like the most right thing he has said. When leaders overstay into power, that is like one of Africa's biggest problem, you know. And it's so funny that he's now one of the, you know, that is a debate for another day.
I think the fourth longest serving president.
You can say that, you know. So manifesting from his own words, you know, we can be able to gauge what we're having, you know. In Uganda, we started having leaders who became political junkies, addicted to political power. But when you're addicted to political power and you're not executing, then at the end of the day, it doesn't benefit anyone, you know. People wouldn't have a problem with someone continuously being their president if at all we are being served. Personally, I wouldn't have any issue, you know. But even as we're pushing forward to have this regime correct its wrongs, what are we bringing into power? Then what ideologies are we pushing forward as Ugandans, you know? So Uganda right now is in a balance of whether we continue with the political messiahs that we are having, or we change to another system that we are not sure of, you know. So basically, going back to what you asked me about the NRA regime and their political agenda that they came with, and how they have been to execute it with time, you know, at the end of the day, it's sad. It's sad and disappointing to Uganda. It's sad and disappointing majorly to the people who brought these so-called messiahs into government. It is really sad. You know, but what do we have to do at the end of the day? Our leaders stand into the dealers. They're you know, they're cracking deals and pushing their way forward into the next day, into the next regime. You know, some of these people even no longer sleep because they are thinking about how they are going to be there the next day, how they are going to keep on having this supplying their addiction of power. You know, so if we're having such a kind of leadership break, then I don't want to be a prophet of doom, but we still have a long way to go until we are able to even sit down and talk about things such as resolving human rights. Because even as we talk about the Human Rights Commission, you know, Drake, do you think it is a mistake, or it is not by design that the Human Rights Commission doesn't get the funding it deserves? If at all the NRA regime came into power with the ideology, if we are going to resolve the violation of human rights, then why wouldn't it be among the sectors that are prioritized? Why do we have things such as the State House, the army, and all those other funny sectors taking up the biggest chunk of the budget, yet things such as health and human rights commission are struggling. Don't you think it's by design? I think it's by design, you know? And if that is the situation we are having in Uganda, and juxtaposing it with the ideologies that we expected this government run by, then it is sad.
At least there is at least some sort of silver lining and some hope that, just like you young people here discussing this on this panel, it gives Ugandans hope. I hope maybe one day one Andrew becomes prime minister of this country, and he still stands. You still stand firm to
politics.
You still stand firm to your ideologies that you propound today. One Shamim becomes maybe president, and you still stand firm to the ideas that you once fronted when you were young. One Mathew becomes the Speaker of Parliament. You still stand firm to the values that you believed in. And in my opinion, that's why I think we needed things like political education back, because that instills in people certain values in leadership that no one else can put it in you. Right now, most political parties are focused on how can we win the next election. They have put aside ideas relating to mentorship of young people. Because even young people who are into these political parties, most people go there for tokenism.
There is a common slogan at the university that you've gone there to eat bread.
Which, in my opinion, I think also for our young generation, we need to caution ourselves about that. And we need to stand firm and say things relating to small handouts that would only take you for lunch and supper. It's not worth buying you. We have a generational cause and we need to stand by it.
I had a chance of listening to the former president of Tanzania, one of the former presidents of Tanzania, His Excellency Jakaya Kikwete. And he was saying when he was around 30-something, 34, that was the first time he attempted to run for president. And at that time, his idea was that let us remove the president at that time, and he was telling us that he was so happy that at that time he did not become president. Then after some time, when he was around 54, he became the president of Tanzania. And this time around, they had time to reform the ideologies that they have. And that is the current situation you're having in Uganda. The young people are saying that let us remove a dictator. That is the ideology they're having. Let us remove a dictator. But after removing a dictator, then what next?
I think that's a conversation many young people need to hold with themselves. You don't just remove a dictator. You need to have plan A, B, and C, even up to Z, if possible. Because you cannot just remove someone who has established a system, a design, the way things run, and you think hosting him out is that's the end.
I know that's the excuse he always uses. Is like, I've not seen any potential leader to put in my shoes, so
could be. Shamim, if you were given power today, do you think you'd have an impact in this country?
The truth is, it's not as easy as it seems, because I'm a law society president, and you're going to wake up one day and everything is on you. Students are complaining, the lecturers are calling you all the time. So I feel like it's really hard that when they get in that seat, they get too comfortable, and then they feel like no one else can do this. You guys are supposed to worship me because I've given you peace, I've given you this and that. You realize that in his regime, we need really to thank him for the education. Then we have
There's
very
a question
strong...
mark on that, though.
No, it's if you really do research, he has really done a very good job on education. You realize that previously people used to be unemployed.
I see Matthew shaking his head.
People used to be unemployed because they were not educated enough for the jobs that were there. But right now, people are actually educated and they don't have enough jobs to do.
What's the quality of that education? And do you know what would actually translate to why very people are unemployed?
No, there's still a difference of a generation that is uneducated with a generation that is educated. Even though we still have like a job, we still have to make sure we get the jobs. Maybe we self-employ ourselves and all that. But I was bringing a point that he has done good to this extent of maybe the military. I realize that he's one of the most reliable presidents in Africa that have that, He has funded so much the military that actually he will sleep and be like, okay, even when you guys want to overthrow me, I have the military, I have the commanders in chief and everything. Yeah. So I feel like there's a lot we need to do so that we can maybe get those potential leaders, so that they'll be like, okay, you know what, we can trust this one. Because one of the reasons that you realize that old people, okay, that are his age, 60, 70, did not maybe vote Robert Chagulanyi, because they feel like he's too young for leadership. They also feel like maybe he's unprepared, or maybe he has different motives, which are, if you can say that you want to be a leader because you want to eliminate someone, that's not a viable reason to lead a country. You want to be a leader because you want to eliminate a specific ethnic group. You feel like, okay, we want to remove the Westerners from leadership and all that. So I feel like these leaders need to get a better motive of saying, okay, they have violated human rights, they have done this and that and that. Let's get a leader who has been groomed to, fill that seat. Maybe they can overthrow, or maybe panel discussions
Okay,
and,
that is a very radical suggestion. We're just going to quickly go for a break, and when we come back, I'll begin with you, Matthew. Otherwise, the discussion is getting more intense, and in my opinion, I think justice has somewhat been served, but my opinion doesn't matter because I am a moderator here, and the panelists definitely decide what is right and what is wrong. And the suggestion seems to say that justice hasn't been served, and they still even question the system a great deal. We shall come back from a break, and when we come back, we shall proceed with remembering the 18th November killings. 3 years gone, has justice been served? Thank you. See you shortly.
National Water and Sewage Corporation is committed to providing cost-effective, clean, safe and reliable quality water and sewage solutions in urban centers across Uganda. National Water and Sewage Corporation reaffirms its commitment to 100% service coverage, geographical expansion, infrastructure development, water quality, pro-poor initiatives, customer care and stakeholder engagement, catchment and water source protection. Be a water hero. Pay your bills to zero balance. Report all leaks, busts, and illegal water connections to enable us serve you better. Reach us through our toll-free numbers on 0800 200 977 or 0800 300 977. You can also communicate with us through any of our online platforms or visit the National Water and Sewage Corporation office nearest to you. This message is brought to you by National Water and Sewage Corporation.
We'll come back from that break. Right before we went into the break, we were remembering the Kampala November killings. 3 years gone with no justice served. And the panel that has joined me today has been interrogating this particular topic. And the general assertion or the general atmosphere in the room seems to agree that no justice has been served, and still questions the efficacy and the efficacy of the various government systems and systems that are in place to see that justice is served. But let's just get back to the conversation. Matthew, I want us to look into government and law enforcement plus accountability. Earlier on, when we started the conversation, you made mention that you're going to look into the government response to human rights. Yeah, the question to you is going to be in line of government, law enforcement, and accountability. Has enough been done to see that there is law enforcement? See to it that there's accountability as to regards to serving of justice to these families that experience these violations, but also other Ugandans who have experienced human rights violations.
Okay. Thank you once again, Drake, and viewers out there. Law enforcement. So many times, so many legal brains in this country have argued that Uganda has some of the best written laws. But to what extent are those laws actually enforced? There's an alcohol bill before Parliament. But you ask yourself, how enforceable are the provisions of this bill going to be? How tangible is it? How efficacious is it going to be? There have been laws like the Anti-Homosexuality Act. How enforceable is that law? Whose bedrooms are you going to enter to see who someone is sleeping with, Now, in regards to November 2020, the discussion earlier was on whether justice was served or not, and law enforcement. To what extent has government actually enforced its mandate, at enforcing some of these laws and ensuring that these families receive some, some level of justice, some reparation, some. But it has been to a very small extent. There's so many times when people come out. When you watch news, you see people out there complaining of how they've been hit by a UPDF truck and nothing has been done about it. It seems there are some godfathers in this country that are untouchable. For example,
They're above the law.
They're above the law. Not everyone is equal before the law, to be honest. But that's a fact. That's a fact. And I think government has done very little in terms of trying to enforce the laws that protect our rights, and even in terms of being held accountable. They do not care. My sister was saying earlier that you have to give credit where it's due in regards to, should saying, education and things like that. For me, I think it's like applauding fish for swimming. That is their job. Even if Museveni wasn't in power or the NRM wasn't in power, if it was any other government, I think some things was bound to happen. It's like boasting that have ensured that there is equality. For example, women are, there is women empowerment. I think that is the direction the world is moving towards. Whether it was the NRM or any other regime, I think we're bound to move towards that direction. So in terms of accountability, government is barely accountable to its citizens. So many times violations happen and no one is, the finger is not, government does not point a finger directly towards one of its own. They were saying that if police, if a particular police officer violates the rights of a Ugandan, that officer will be held accountable. But how many police officers have we seen being tried in court? Many times it goes silent, and I feel like it's brewing tension between Ugandans and the law enforcers. And if there is no, if we don't bridge that gap between the citizens and between the civilians and the army officers and the policemen, then it's going to be hard for them also to do their job, because they will not get information, unless they have to scold it out of someone, Yet this information could be crucial even for say, peace to reign. Last year, under very unfortunate circumstances, we lost, was it last year or early this year, when we lost that minister, what was his name? Just skipped my mind. That was shot by his security guard. It shows the kind of tension that is between certain classes in this country. Someone does not have the space to come out and maybe confront particular people about the challenges they're facing. His salaries have not been paid. It's not the minister's job to pay his salary, But because there's so much anger, he lets it out on someone who is probably even innocent, who has nothing to do with the payment of his salary. You see, so even government officials cannot hold government itself accountable. So it becomes hard for the citizens to also hold government accountable.
Could that then also relate to the fact that even when NGOs, in carrying out their mandate in holding the government accountable, we see their offices being raided?
Yes.
We see activists being
clamped down,
arbitrarily arrested and detained in safe houses that are not provided for by the law. Does that then also translate to that?
Yes, I think it does. I think government is not ready to have that conversation. It's not ready to be held accountable. Last week, Councillor Nicholas Opio was narrating the ordeal he had to go through, reason why he fled this country, and it was about the same thing, trying to hold government accountable. Trying to seek justice for those who were killed in November 2020, trying to, ask the questions about the missing persons in this country. Not until one day he was having lunch, he was driven away, he was whisked away in a drone. covered up. He didn't know where he was being taken. So that is the price you pay for trying to hold government accountable. So, like my brother was saying earlier, Ugandans are scared. I think that's true. That is true, because I'm a student. I want to study. I don't want to be affected by, certain things. But if you and I or someone out there doesn't voice out some of these concerns, try to hold government accountable, then we won't see anything different. That's why I'm so happy that Civic Space TV is having this kind of conversation, and that will maybe spark a thought or two in Ugandans out there to try and be more relentless in the pursuit of holding government accountable.
All right. Thank you. That is quite true. That it's the aspect relating to accountability and law enforcement in this country is largely questionable. But also in it being largely questionable, we don't know who exactly you can hold accountable, because we have individuals who in itself have no power, but have so much power that those people who are in those positions with so-called power bend to them.
True.
So when you have deep states, you have individuals with power that even the person who is assumed to have the power reports to that person.
Yes.
Then it's highly questionable.
We have
Bureaucracy.
we have the IGG. Then there is the State House Anti-Corruption Unit. And so
Who reports to who?
Who reports to who? Exactly.
Anyway. Okay. Maybe the combinations of those various institutions would see a change, could be, because I know the Human Rights Commission is going to be combined with a number of other government institutions, the National Youth Council, with the ministry. There are those debates as well. But Shamim, let's talk about public awareness and advocacy. I'm relating it still to the aspect of accountability. Non-government organizations like Civic, like Center for Constitutional Governance, among others, are doing a tremendous job in trying to advocate, but also they're doing a tremendous job in availing civic space for people to engage in such conversations. But in one way or the other, they're somewhat also frustrated in their activities. But also, aside from the aspect of advocacy, public awareness. Earlier on in the first half of the show, I clearly showed to you that many Ugandans are, first of all, illiterate about their rights. But even Ugandans being illiterate about their rights, many Ugandans do not actually know. They're just living for the sake of living. So how would you then, first of all, spark the aspect of advocacy, the spirit of activism in people? But how can we translate public awareness as we spark the spirit of activism? How can we have effective public awareness as regards to their rights? But what channels do you have them to take when your rights are violated?
In regards to public awareness, you already told us clearly that some people do not even know the rights they're supposed to be fighting for, because in order to fight for a right, you need to know it, Yeah. Some people are actually still in prisons and they have not been given a right to fair hearing, maybe because they can't afford the lawyers, or maybe because these court sessions have been adjourned over and over.
Yeah.
But I feel like if the people knew what they are entitled to be having, they would probably give more energy in fighting for it, So plus another thing, I feel like the people are scared, even when they know that they have a right to do this. They're like, but what if I also engage in fighting for it, then I also become a victim, die at 18, or die and leave my 2 children. So most people decide, not because they do not know that they have the right, but because they do not want to be victims of the circumstances of fighting for the right, Because that if I wake up one day and I'm putting on red and I'm rioting in the city, they're going to, they're going to take me to police and they're going to take me to court, or they're probably going to also make me disappear, and then my family is going to be miserable. So most people look at the circumstances and then they just decide to sit down and they're like, okay, if I get food, if I feed my children, that is enough, which is not really supposed to be. It is not supposed to be like that. When we go back to the public awareness, I feel like the Human Rights Commission is supposed to really do more to move in societies, tell people what they the people are supposed to know their rights, supposed to know that it's supposed to be like this and this. They're supposed to be aware of the constitution, because you realize Uganda is one of the countries that teaches history. You're going to study Hitler, you're going to study all those politicians, but do these children in schools know what is really happening? Do they know what is happening and why it is happening? Yeah. So I feel like they focus more on the history of Western, Western
Wow.
culture. You're going to know what happened in 1990, what in whatever country, but you don't know what is happening in your own country. People cannot even realize that this regime, yes, it has been peaceful, but there's quite a small difference with what was happening in the regimes of Idi Amin. Just that for them, they were openly out there, they were dictators, like in the broad daylight, not acting indirectly through the military or anything. Yeah. So I feel like people are not aware, and I feel like even though they would be aware, some of them, even though they know, they are scared to do what they can do in their power, because they do not really have the confidence, and they do not really want to be victims. So I feel like the government should really fund those NGOs to talk to people, to talk to children, to talk to maybe the youth, because you realize that one of these people, most of the victims, if they're youth, they are just running around. They just want to be part of the chaos. You see people running, you're like, okay, I need to know what is happening. But I feel like if those people were rioting because we want this person out, we want to achieve this, they could achieve more by, knowing the cause. There's this thing called the cause and effect. In most cases, if you know the cause, you're going to know the effect. If you know the problem, you're going to provide a solution. Yeah. So I feel like if they are aware of the rights that they have, just like we are here, you're educated, you know what is happening, you know what happened. That is why we are actually sad that this is happening. So I feel like if you get more information, it gives you a better perspective of getting a solution, of knowing what is on ground and how you can provide solutions to what is happening. Yeah, so Ugandans really need to know their rights, and the government should really put in a hand. It's not really about the funding. I feel like when you see that the bills that come out, there is a lot of finances that can go to something like human rights. That is a very essential topic. It's delicate, It goes back to someone's right. It goes back to someone's life and how it affects other people's lives. So I feel like the government really has finances. They just don't want to, just like I said, the design, They have just not prioritized it, but they can if they wanted to. Or maybe they see other things as more important, but this is a very important aspect. Yeah. And these are conversations that are supposed to be held so that we can see that there's a problem and we need to either be the solution or create the solution.
All right, perfect. Andrew, international response. All of us are aware of what happened, the international response, when the government went ahead and passed into law the anti-homosexuality law. And allegations, many politicians have seen they've been making they've been making speeches that why hasn't the Western world responded the same when it came when it came to violations of human rights in Uganda? Why is it that it's only this particular law that would then spark international response, but when it comes to violations of human rights in Uganda, they're all mute? But nonetheless, the question is in line of international response. What was their reaction as regards to these killings, as regards to the violations of human rights in this country?
Thank you very much, Drake. Now, first of all, allow me to say that when you're talking about these violations, in the Ugandan aspect, we bring it in a way that these things are being politicized. And when you're talking about the international community and their response, you can also see that these guys are also playing a game of interests. What do they have to say about the human rights? When we have people, the so-called advocates of human rights, going out maybe to the US, we saw Chagulani going out to the US, what agenda are these people pushing? Because in Uganda we have people who have different interests. I cannot be the judge of that, but at least we know I cannot be the judge of their interests, but at least I know that they have their own personal interests. So when we have such the so-called advocates and what they're advocating for, when they go out there, the situation that they put out to the international community is political in nature. And when you're talking about human rights, I believe that this should surpass politics. This should surpass politics, you know. The kind of political thinking I'm talking about, in that I am going to use the violation of human rights to push my political agenda, to push removing a dictator. You know, yes, you can use it, but at the end of the day, have it at the back of your minds that whether Museveni is done in power, whether it is Chagulanyi, whether it is Besigye or who, human rights have to be respected.
Yeah.
You know, this country did not begin with Museveni, and violation of human rights in Uganda did not start with Museveni's regime. You know, they have always been there, but we need a solution that is going to come once and for all.
Yeah.
You know, so the response of the international community shouldn't be a shock to any of us.
Yeah.
It is because of the so-called advocates we are having and how they are taking it to the international community.
But we've seen reports by UN, and they have the released reports on violations of human rights in Uganda, and they usually release annual reports. And for this year, they've said, for last year, there was an aspect that there's a shrinking civic space in Uganda, but also there are numerous violations that are happening. So at least there's some sort of...
Now, Drake, some of these things should surpass the theoretical nature that they're being given.
Yeah.
If you've studied jurisprudence, I know all of us have studied jurisprudence, you will understand that critical race theory, which included the fight for the rights of the blacks that started in the US, you know, it came out at a point whereby these guys started saying that legislation, the different legislations that were there, even feminism, the different legislations were not going to solve this inequality. So the UN coming up and saying that there's a shrinking, there's a shrink in the human rights in different countries, in Uganda and all that, that doesn't solve the issue. Because even us as Ugandans, we see it, that our human rights are being violated. You know, there's shrinkage in the human rights, but that does not solve the problem. You know, what is going to solve the problem are going to be the actions that they are going to take. I want to fault the UN for actually not doing so much in terms of human rights violations in Africa and in Uganda in particular.
Yeah.
You know, even through their different bodies, you know, because the UN is supposed to be a mechanism that is supposed to hold these leaders accountable. But I'm sorry to say, but from time to time, they have showed us that they do not have the capacity to do that. Or if they have the capacity to do that, then they have not done it to the extent that we expect it to be done in Africa.
Yeah.
You know, because you cannot come and give us report after report. That is what some members of parliament have been suggesting. Sitting down and debating after debate, passing bills after bills, acts after acts is not going to solve the problem. What is going to solve the problem is the solution that we are going to give to it. You know, so the US, the Western world and what coming out and criticizing the human rights violation in Africa is not going to solve anything. What is going to solve this human rights violation is the action that we put to it, is the seriousness that we adopt and put to the human rights violations, which is not happening.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, things are going to stay the way they are. But when controversial bills such as the anti-homosexuality bill comes up, you see the kind of reaction they get from the you know, from the Western world with all the bans and all that, because they believe that is what they believe in, you know. So I think even before we look at the international community as maybe a messiah to now come and help us resolve our wrongs, we must start internally, because we're not going to be looking at the Western world to solve Africa's problems all the time.
Yeah.
Africa must start resolving its own problem. If we want to stop the violation of human rights, you know, it has to start with us. It has to start with the leaders that we are having. It has to start with the organs that we are having, the discipline that we are going to instill in these different organs. You know, because even if the US came up and said that there are so many violations of human rights in Uganda, you know, they're not going to come here and propel the police to act in the manner they're supposed to act in. You know, we saw that they were criticizing the anti-homosexuality bill, but what can they do to force Uganda to adopt to this bill?
Financial
With the sanctions and all that, then why aren't they doing the same for human rights? So this is a game of interests. Where do their interests lie best? So if we keep on relying to the Western world to resolve our problems, then we are going to keep on staying with these problems because that is where they can hold us.
Okay. All right. Matthew, community impact. Families lost loved ones. Others haven't. People are missing.
Yeah.
People have been looking for their loved ones for years now, and they're still looking for their loved ones. Just asking, when shall we get to see their loved ones again? People have sustained injuries, injuries that cannot be cured. We have seen people. We have seen people with bullets in their backs. I've seen there's that girl who was, I think they were going to school and she was shot.
Yes.
And numerous violations occurred. What does this human rights violation have in terms of the impact it has on the community?
Thank you once again, Drake. The impact of the human rights violations in the community is both physical and psychological. Most times we undermine the psychological bit of it. Physically, yes, there's so many. Everyone who got injured that day or during that time of November 2020, and over the years as well. People like Kakwenza, for example. Remember when Kakwenza was flogged, for lack of a better word, and you could see on TV the marks, the bruises, the wounds, the scars left behind by what the ordeal he went through in the hands of security forces. That just shows what the extent to which these people do not have any regard towards, if it's there, it's very little, towards how much pain they can inflict on you. So there's a lot of physical trauma people have undergone, like you've mentioned. The girl who was shot, I think she was seated in a coaster, and the stray bullet hit her. I don't know how much government has done in ensuring that she receives the kind of compensation or treatment.
In law, they say restitution.
Yes, restitution.
Put her back in the position where she was in.
Yes, and also ask yourself, can they actually put her back in that position? I saw that there's a lady who is permanently now bedridden because her spine got ruptured that day. So there's a lot of physical damage on the health, that's even a violation of the right to health of many Ugandans. Then psychologically, all the members of the 54, all the members that were attached to the families of the 54 victims that day, we all know what it means to lose a loved one. We've all lost someone along the way, a friend,
and in those circumstances,
member,
losing someone in those
circumstances. And imagine those who died while they were not even involved in this. You can never move on from that. So there's a lot of psychological trauma, and for me, I think at the end of the day, there's a lot of anger. Ugandans are bitter. They're angry, and if no tangible solution, if no tangible conversation or restitution and reparation is done, I think
we're like in a boiling pot.
Yeah, we're in a boiling pot.
We're soon going to start.
Something can, there have been incidents where I remember, for example, you remember there was that period when police officers, for example, or security forces were shooting up people, shooting up employees, shooting up loan officers, shooting up, that just shows the kind of anger people have in them. For example, at the university, I'll use the example of Makerere. I feel like students, there's a lot of, tension among students. There is no room for reasonable conversation between students and the administration. It's like they fear each other. When the administration does something, the instant response of students is to strike, or to not even to strike, to protest, for example. And when that is done, the response is tear gas and things like that. When you do the same thing in town, the response is tear gas and things like that. So there's a lot of anger, and all that is caused by the psychological trauma that Ugandans have had to deal with over this period of time. And Andrew was earlier saying that revolutions have not been successful through dialogue. Something radical has to be done. And for me, I don't believe in violence or a radical approach to things, but someday that might be inevitable. Truth of the matter is, Uganda has never had peaceful transition of power. I know our Minister for Justice and Constitutional Affairs he claims to be fronting a dialogue on peaceful transition. The president says otherwise, so we don't know who is telling the truth and who is lying. But we need to have these conversations. We need to have conversations that sort of heal these wounds, that nurse these wounds, that we need to have a better Uganda, because at the end of the day, we shall all die and leave Uganda behind. And if we leave a Uganda that is in this state, or even worse, then all these achievements that the government, for example, boasts of over the years will be useless. Yeah.
All right.
No, maybe to add on what you have said, the Honorable Lord Mayor the other day said that these things these people are telling us, the conversations they are telling us they are having, and all these attempts they are trying to propose, it's just an attempt to hoodwink Ugandans that there is actually something going on. So I just want to agree with him. This dialogue it's nothing. There's no dialogue.
I also feel like it's no longer a solution. He's saying that one day, but I realize that that day is today, it's present. It is clear that dialogue is not going to be the solution for political transition. It definitely has to be involved with overthrow. It has to be an army or something.
But people, we are in the era of the 21st century.
No, but Drake, if you not even so long ago, Africa is going back to the trend of military, overthrow.
Coup d'etat.
Yeah, coup d'etat. So
But
Mali and
Burkina
Faso.
But to me, I think right now at this point in Uganda, I think we have all heard of the standby generator.
And who is the standby generator?
Just stay tuned. You'll hear more interesting news.
I hope views that are fronted on this show are not my own. That's a disclaimer. Those are your views. All right. I know we're edging towards the end, but let me come to you, Shamim. What efforts have been done to memorize and remember people who were killed on 18th November 2020? Have there been even any efforts to remember them and memorize them?
I feel like the fact that the leader of opposition, Matthias Boga, has been in parliament shows that NUP as a party really still feels for what happened. It still remembers what happened, and it's still trying to fight for the people. And there's also the fact that Bobi Wine is trying to help some of the families that lost their loved ones, especially those who cannot help themselves. I feel like that is really a very good thing, because he's reaching out to the families. Yes, he knows that the reason why those people were rioting is because they wanted him to be set free. So he also has to create something like an impact in their lives. Another thing, I think every 18th, Bobi Wine holds something like, I don't know if I can call it a party or what can we call it? Commemoration for those people, and then the party comes together, and then they talk about it, and then they bring out, they talk about a lot of stuff, solutions, how they can solve it, how they can maybe help the people who were affected feel better about it, and maybe help them in some way or the other. So I feel like the party itself has really tried to just like you said, like the mosquito bites, to be on the government all the time. Realize that they even had to stage a boycott in parliament. They were like, if you don't give us the files, if you don't release them, we're probably not coming back to parliament anymore. Yeah, so I feel like they've really done a bit of their part. They have tried to make sure that these people are given justice. Honorable Mpuga was saying that he wants the people released. The same people who are still in prison, by the way.
Yeah.
So he was saying, give out the files. He gave them a period of a month, but he also said that please release the people who are still in prison. You know, you can't keep adjourning court sessions and all that. So them wanting the people released, you realize that when the Sejirinyas and the Sewanyanas were out, people would go to see them, even when he has been in hospital. I think they were funding him to go outside and get treatment. So I feel like there's been something that has been done to remember the people, and if I think that the files were released on 30th November.
Yeah.
So the fact that the month where they died is when they really were so much on the government to release those files, shows that they have not forgotten. Shows that it's still a scar that is on their skin, that they really have to make sure that the people feel, I don't know how I can say it, they want to make sure that the families of those people who lost their loved ones know that they have not forgotten them, and they're still trying to fight for them, and that soon they're going to create a solution to the problem that happened.
All right. Thank you. We have reached towards the end of our conversation, but I'll just by way of concluding, I'll begin with you, Andrew. What recommendations would you make for moving forward in regards to the respect of human rights, but relating it to the conversation that we have today?
Yes, thank you very much. Now, the recommendations I have, they're very simple. They come from a point of view, in a way that we must look at interests that are beyond those of ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, the political space in Uganda is built in a way that everyone is chasing an interest. Even these so-called advocates and all that. At the end of the day, when you dig deep into all these organizations and what, they are all chasing what Ugandans have called the bread. You know, they are chasing the bread. You know, but at the end of the day, that is not going to resolve anything. You know, so for me, my major recommendation would be a check.
Yeah.
A check in all the institutions, be it private, be it government. You know, starting from the parliament, the executive, human rights commission, the key violators of human rights, the people who are supposed to protect us, the Uganda police and the military and all those other security organs that they have put in place. We need a check in all of them, you know, because at the end of the day, even if we have the best legislation, even if we sit down and have the biggest conversations, if we do not have a check in all those organs of government, at the end of the day, we shall sit down, speak. At the end of the day, someone else is abducted in a drone, which is not going to resolve anything.
Yeah.
But if we have a check in these organs and say that this is how you're supposed to conduct your operations, this is how operations are supposed to be conducted, going forward, this is how things should be conducted. You know, that is what is going to bring the change and the peace and everything that we desire so much. You know, so for me, that is my major recommendation. We need a check in each and every institution from the leaders that we have entrusted with power. You know, but I think that will be quite difficult. You know, because these leaders have already had an establishment of a mindset that whatever they do, they must benefit from it. You know, so people push human rights, but at the end of the day, they expect something from the international community. I know that when I go and I sell my ideologies to an organization from the Western world about human rights violation, I want to be given something. And that's something I won't use it in a certain way somewhere. You know? So that would be my major recommendation.
Thank you. Mathew, recommendations and parting shots.
Thank you. For me, I think I'll just borrow from what Andrew said earlier. We shouldn't wait for the West to come and solve our problem. Because precedent has it that most times when these people come to try and resolve our problems, they leave us in a more devastated condition. Look at Libya, for example. That is my perfect example. Libyans relied on the US to come and NATO to resolve its problems. I don't know, maybe they'll even need 10, 20 years to catch up with Uganda. Yet they were maybe 50 years ahead of us in terms of development. So I think I don't want us to give up on having conversations. I think we should have more conversations around the human rights violations in this country. We should engage all stakeholders, government and those who are suffering, Then I think we should also create awareness. If we cannot fight for what we do not know, people do not know their rights. So at the end of the day, someone should start a campaign out there, maybe a Know Your Rights campaign or something like that. And everyone, a border man, a lecturer in the school, at the university, a P6 student, let us all know our rights, so that at the end of the day, I'll borrow from the words of a certain colleague of mine who likes saying that for us to have a better Uganda, we need to build a central nervous system that enables us to feel each other's pain. If Drake, you cannot feel my pain, you'll not fight for me. If I cannot feel your pain, I'll not fight for you. So we need to be each other's keepers and ensure that at the end of the day, government is held accountable, and government shouldn't take it in bad faith when we ask them to actually perform their duties.
Perfect. I think the Ministry of Justice and Constitutional Affairs should take what your suggestion of a Know Your Rights campaign, and maybe organizations, human rights organizations, those with the resources should look at fronting such ideas. Thank you very much. Let's conclude with the only lady on the show.
Thank you so much, Drake. I'm going to add on what my colleagues have said. There's this issue of people who normally come up with NGOs. They have their interest. Probably they want to, you've seen pictures, you've seen certain circumstances of people taking pictures of children who are poor, who have ragged clothes, and the only thing they're targeting is the Western people to give them funding. Then they're going to put it in whatever they want to do. They want to maybe get land and everything. So you realize that even some people who help these people, some people who are helping in the human rights, people even who are helping in even other aspects, the feminism, they have their own interests. They're not focusing on solving the problem, but they're focusing on using the problem to actually get finances.
Push them somewhere.
So I feel like as Ugandans, as citizens, we're supposed to really focus on what the problem is. Violation of human rights is such an essential subject. It is really fundamental. It is important. So I feel like actually even the government, the parliament will actually sit and talk about irrelevant things, and you're like, these people do not see what is really important, So instead of them talking about, let me see, give an example of what, even these bills of the alcohol, like alcohol bill, you've not solved problems of people who are suffering, who are not eating, and then you're focusing on, something like alcohol, which is really even very hard to,
implement.
Exactly. So I feel like they should focus on the important issues. Then I also feel like they should really educate these children, starting from primary, of the history of Uganda, not focusing on on the Western culture and everything. Then I also feel like they should listen to these leaders. There are people who need to be released, people who are still in prison. Who are still being detained unlawfully, they need to be released, and then they also need to implement the laws, because they make the laws. What is the use of a law that is not being implemented? This is how you find that people are going to violate all these laws. If you're in some countries, people will not disobey these traffic lights. If it is not saying move, they will actually be there until, but you realize Ugandans will just, pass, because they know that the laws are there, but they're not being implemented. So they do not respect the laws. So I feel like we should, or maybe as Ugandans, we can start that's why they always say that it starts with you.
Yeah.
I feel like if citizens of Uganda decided to respect the laws and the government did so much to implement them, there would really be a change.
Awesome. You've heard it there from the panelists tonight. We've been joined by Mathew Mugisa from Makerere University, Ms. Akampurira Shamim from King Ceasor University, and Mr. Andrew Kinobere from Uganda Christian University. Thank you very much for your great insights in this discussion. It has been worth a shot, and definitely the recommendations and the opinions fronted by all of you have been brilliant and exceptional. And I call upon the relevant stakeholders out there to do their role and mandate. Human rights is a question that everyone has to enjoy, and it's inherent. It's not supposed to be granted by the state. Rather, the state is supposed to protect the enjoyment of such rights. Otherwise, my name is Douglas Drake. Tonight we've been discussing, remembering the 18th November killings. 3 years gone, has justice been served? And that is what the panelists have been questioning today. Thank you very much to the production crew, Civic Space TV, Center for Constitutional Governance for making this happen. Otherwise, see you next week, same time, same place.